As training camp approaches, there are still many NHL players left out there yet to be signed. We'll be talking about a few that could be great options for the Habs to sign to professional tryouts and maybe a contract heading into the season, especially with the likes of Jesse Puljujarvi and maybe even Tomas Tatar. That plus which Habs prospect is most likely to make the team this year, and we also have a big Casey DeSmith trade update, so you'll want to stick around for this edition of Habs Digest. Jesse, as we get into this Casey DeSmith trade update, a quick reminder to the thousands of people watching who have not hit the subscribe button. If you could do it now, it'd be really appreciated. We're trying to grow, we're trying to hit 10K, and if you want to be part of that, we'd really like if you did. All right, Jesse, let's get into this. Casey DeSmith. So Jonathan Bernier of the Journal de Montréal reported that the Canadiens front office had initially anticipated a swift departure for DeSmith. A member of the Habs general staff confirmed to the Journal 2 weeks ago that another trade was expected to be announced within days of the one that sent Petrie home to Michigan. We're still waiting for it. So this might be new news, it might not. I only came across this today, but Jesse, why do you think that is? I mean, to me, I think it's just maybe the goalie market is dried up and maybe Kent Hughes just hasn't found a trade where he's netting the return that he wants.
No, and it's interesting to hear this update because you had to feel like Kent Hughes was a busy man. He gave his word not only to Petrie, but also to DeSmith that, he's really trying to make something happen here. So no surprises that he is trying to do so. But as we know, right, there's just not a huge market. We're not getting a whole lot back really in terms of probably of returns of what he's seeing right now. And, with Petrie, we kind of did something more out of a kindness, just given the player's history, having played with the team before and everything else. But I think you're right, Josh, that maybe it might be a situation where Kent Hughes just doesn't want to take that, that lowest return, maybe just going to wait a little bit. Of course, he doesn't want to drag it out too much, but Kent Hughes, he's savvy. He's always so good with these trades, right? And it's important, with your asset management to really get it right. And whether it's Casey DeSmith or it's Jake Allen, because it really looks like one of these two, like, does it now mean that maybe because the Casey DeSmith trade is harder that now he's going to maybe look more towards Jake Allen? Who knows, right? You have to feel like he's kind of weighing all options, but you have to feel like something's going to happen on this front pretty soon.
Yeah, it's strange because I feel like the longer you hold on to Casey, the lower the trade value is going to be, because like the idea of Casey right now is a backup goalie. And if you head into the season with him without the intention of really playing him, the idea might shift to him being a third stringer just among GMs, right? At least they're leverage when they're on a trade call. Like, he's your third stringer in Montreal, right? And teams are going to offer even less. So I feel like trading him now at least keeps his value a little higher. But you got to think too, Jesse, after Kent Hughes sort of admittedly took less than what Jeff Petrie was worth in that trade with Detroit, just getting back Gustav Lindstrom, it's like, and a pick. He definitely could have got more for retaining half of Petrie's salary. You got to think that after doing that, doing a favor to Jeff Petrie, which really is awesome for the Habs, I just feel like he's now a lot more hesitant to do something else that's just as kind of like not valuable, right? He did a great favor. It's awesome. But as we analyzed earlier, the goalie market in the past year has just not been good, and they've been fetching like third and fourth round picks. I mean, at this point, what would you even want for Casey DeSmith? Is like a fourth or fifth round pick enough for you?
It's hard to say, right? Like, I would really love it if we could kind of package that up, let's say, with Pajola and Mia. Like, and I'm kind of feel like that's what Kent Hughes is kind of working on here. Like, if it's not really the goalie market, you might need to kind of package that. And if he could kind of do that in some other type of way, we never want to rule out what Kent Hughes is possible of, because like, we still are looking for our 1A. Samuel Montembeault is great, right? But if we could somehow pivot in this type of situation where we're able to use our plethora of picks that we have in the future, we say we're going to need to get a goalie sooner than later. And I wouldn't rule out Casey DeSmith being part of some sort of package to really make that happen sooner than later.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see, Kent. All right, let's move on to the second topic of the video. And which prospect most likely to make the opening roster? Now, Jesse, there's a lot of options here. The article from A Winning Habit today outlined three, those being Owen Beck, Joshua Watt, and David Reinbacher. But I wanted to also mention Emil Heineman in that conversation just because of his amazing hot streak, especially goal-scoring wise, to end the season with Laval last year. When you look at these, are definitely the four guys that have the highest chance at making the Habs roster coming into the season. Which one of these four do you think has the highest chance of breaking through and maybe starting on opening night for Montreal?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying first that I think all four, and I think Emil Heineman is a great inclusion to that list, Josh, are going to be seriously considered for a spot on opening night with the Montreal Canadiens. We're trying to create some spots. We're trying to get rid of some older players. I think that might even happen in the next couple of weeks. leading up to training camp, which might open up some spots even further, because I think Habs management really wants to take a good look, see what we have here. Out of those four, I would say just to the nature of what we're I would say if you're a winger, you probably have a better chance, because Owen Beck had an amazing camp last year. He's going to probably play pretty solid, but as a lot of people in kind of been breaking down, it's like he would almost need to replace Jake Evans. And unless Christian Dvorak is getting moved, Christian Dvorak gets moved, I say Owen Beck's making this team. Absolutely. Now, it's quite a thing to go with a lot of young centers, even though Jake Evans isn't really that young anymore. You could say Monahan having that experience, but right, exactly. He looks young still, right? So, Dvorak still kind of serves that purpose, right? But you got to feel like we're really doing that youth movement. But I feel like a winger like Joshua Watt, just for the fact that, again, is even a play on his off wing, there maybe might be a little bit less competition there. But I really think the main reason that Joshua Watt has the best chance of making this team, and I know this sounds wild, is because the Habs are looking to complete that first line. They know that Dach is going to be good on that first line. We all know it. We saw the numbers. We know that. But there's such great value of spreading that offense over that second line. You could very much argue it would be optimum for the Habs if they find that good kind of chemistry, that good missing piece on that first line, to have Kirby Dach at that 2C. And we've shown that Joshua was very intelligent, can play with a lot of great players, amazing playoff performer. And what's big about him is that his big knock in the past was that he didn't bring enough effort every night. But as we see from the World Junior Championships and everything since, he's brought that hustle, that intensity. And you then compare that with the skill that he has, that intelligence. I could honestly see him being a really good pair with Nick Suzuki, playing really well. And just by virtue of that, obviously Cole Caufield, if you're going to play well with Nick Suzuki, by extension, you're just going to play well with Caufield as well, the way they're so in sync, right? So I could honestly see that being amazing. Now, whether that happens opening night, maybe the chances of that are a little bit lower, but to see that in the future, Joshua Watt, I think it's something that we should all be keeping a very close eye on.
Wow, I like that take, actually, because like you said, we saw him play with Connor Bedard at the World Juniors, and he looked like he was a perfect fit, right? So I think having him as a potential first line running mate is a very, very bold prediction, but I love it. I think that's a very, very interesting take about this, because Kirby, again, has really shown that he thrives at the center position. So I like that. I'm going to take a little bit of a different route, and while Joshua Watt is still up on my list, I personally think maybe a year or two in the AHL to condition him and get him more used to the faster paced game, working his skating, could benefit him, even though he definitely has the skill to make the NHL right now. As for Emil Heineman, I just feel like the Habs would maybe need to clear out a wing. I feel like they're maybe more inclined to play someone like Ullinen or Pezzetta because they're signed to NHL deals, as opposed to someone like Heineman, even if Heineman has that power play upside. And as for Owen Beck, like you said, there's a logjam at center. So, look, in a vacuum, I understand that it's probably best if David Reinbacher goes back to Switzerland. And is he going to get sent back there? Probably yes. However, if he comes into training camp and just starts dominating, I think it might even be the most likely case. He has no one blocking him, right? If he comes into the Habs, he's their probably number 2 right D with easily a chance to move up to number 1 at some point in the season if he performs. Now, he's still very young, so maybe not. Maybe I'm a bit optimistic, but he'd at least be playing like a decent amount of minutes, even if it's third pairing. But he doesn't have anyone blocking him from making the roster while these other guys really do, right? So, I can see you playing Reinbacher over someone like Barron or Kovacevic if the situation is right. So, for me, I think he might be the most likely, but the problem is I don't know whether the Habs want to send him back to Switzerland or not, and I think they're probably inclined to do that. Other than him, I would probably have to agree with you maybe that Joshua Watt has a chance, but no, it's so difficult. I'm going to stick with my prediction, Reinbacher. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because it's going to be a very interesting training camp. Now on to the final topic of the video, and this is where it gets really interesting. These could be huge for the Montreal Canadiens. Look, there's a lot of guys still out there, a lot of free agents still out there, and while, Montreal hasn't signed a player to a professional tryout and then signed him to a contract since Thomas Fleischmann back in, I think, 2014 or 15. Now, he was traded for Deno, so that worked out well. But a professional tryout is basically just invite him to camp, see what they can do, and see if you want to offer him a contract after. And Jesse, there's still a lot of guys out there who could potentially be fits on Montreal. And the first guy I wanted to talk about very briefly is Ethan Bear. Now, look, I understand the Habs, especially with Reinbacher, someone like Mailloux coming up, a lot of the right Ds like Kovacevic, Barron, and even Harris, who plays a bit on the right side, even though he's a lefty. Maybe the Habs would be more inclined to play them over someone like Ethan Bear. Just a quick thought on Ethan Bear. Do you think he's necessarily a fit for the Habs or not? Because in Marc Dumont's article, he mentions him, and I just wanted to bring him up.
Yeah, no, it's fair all the same, right? Right-handed defenseman, you always gotta at least pay attention, give it a consideration. I think I would consider a little bit more if we weren't so lucky in just the pickup of Jonathan Kovacevic last year. Again, very underrated for what he kind of brought.
Mhm.
I really don't feel like he would necessarily be an upgrade over him just for what he's really brought. Just kind of so solid defensively, very little mistakes, everything else. So while I think it's an interesting proposition, I'd probably have to keep with what we have in the fold at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. Nothing against Ethan Bear. I just think the timeline doesn't necessarily fit. There's some other guys you'd maybe rather give the shot to, and that's it, right? But the second option's a lot more interesting, Jesse, and that is a former Hab, and that's Tomas Tatar. He is still available. He had a 20-goal season with New Jersey. He's been a 20-goal scorer everywhere he's went in the NHL, and he's still unsigned, which is a bit confusing because not only does he score, he has good underlying numbers. Now, at this point in Tatar's career, like you mentioned to me before the show, like he's probably out there looking to win. However, if Montreal decides to sign him to a professional tryout and they're like, man, he's still got it, he can easily play the wing for us, get some goals, I feel like if they do that, it'd be for the purpose of trading him at the deadline, maybe to a contender. Do you see a world where they maybe try and sign Tatar to a one-year deal, flip him at the deadline for a draft pick?
Well, it's an interesting proposition for sure, just because he's going to bring offense and he's going to be solid defensively. Like, his net effect on the team would be very positive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of reasons, but the reason that I don't think the Habs management will do this is because we're focusing on development. We're still really rebuilding. Obviously, I loved him in his time with the Habs, had great numbers, was part of a great first line. Loved his time here, right? You just got to feel like there's been a changing of the guard. Things have changed. This team now feels different. While, the past wasn't terrible, we want to go in a new direction. We want to see those new faces, but most importantly, we just want to make space for a lot of those younger guys, right? So I think that's probably the biggest reason here.
Yeah, and I mean, if they did try and pull a Monahan with him, it might make some sense, but I think that's the only way they maybe do this. But Jesse, you said someone young, okay? Let's get into the last guy, and I'm pretty sure he's the guy I'm going to put in the thumbnail, and that is our boy Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, we've talked about him on the show before. There were lots of rumors of a Puljujarvi trade to Montreal earlier this year, but he's only 25. He fits the timeline, and also he fits the Habs' plans from a peak performance point of view. Yes, there are red flags. He's had some injuries. He has not produced the way they wanted him to. He has yet to hit 40 points in a season. However, the potential could still be there for Jesse Puljujarvi if he can put everything together in the right environment. Now, I know he was in some very solid environments in Edmonton and in Carolina, and the fact he didn't put it together there, maybe not so great, but maybe those are more high-pressure environments. And while Montreal, yes, is high pressure from a media perspective, maybe playing under a coach like Marty St. Louis for a team that's in a rebuild, maybe that's some place where he's able to kind of thrive. I mean, do you think he maybe fits the timeline a bit better? And do you see the Habs ever taking a risk on him?
He's really not as bad of a player as he's always kind of made out to be. He's taken some recent strides in the last couple of years, but he still just isn't a good fit in Montreal. He just doesn't feel like the type of player that we're going for right now and really in where we're at, right? Which is really unfortunate because, the great size, like you mentioned, solid defensively, has shown that, he can maybe get it together offensively as well, right? But I think we've been so lucky in just the draft picks that we've had of late, in our prospects coming up, where it really negates the need for a player around that age. We've done such a great job. Even I would say like just getting an Alex Newhook is just tremendously such a better acquisition than a Jesse Puljujarvi. I think for many different reasons, which kind of serves a lot of those same sort of things that you would be going for, right? That younger player, a little bit of that untapped offensive capability. But I think Alex Newhook has shown much more of a propensity to be able to fulfill that potential and exceed it in the future. So I think especially with just recent acquisitions of that, just, for that reason, I would probably just need to pass on that one.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I can see a world where Puljujarvi just slots in exactly where Armia is if you can get rid of Armia. But look, I still like Jesse. I think he's like a living meme. He's funny. He seems to be a nice guy to go around. He loves pizza, and he's 25. And if the Habs signed him to a one-year deal, would he maybe extend with them after that? Who knows? I think he's my most likely of these three. I think he'd be fun. But who do you guys think of these guys, or maybe even of guys who are still unsigned that we didn't mention? Who do you think is the most likely to sign a professional trial for the Habs and maybe even get signed to a season contract? Let us know down below. We'd love to hear from you. But that'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 10,000 subs, and we really appreciate the support. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.